Well, thank you for staying with us for the news review. We're joined this morning by Executive Director, Media Foundation for West Africa, Suleimana Brahima. He joins us to review the pertinent issues making the headlines in our news portals. Mr. Brahima, a very good morning to you, sir.
Good morning to you, and good morning to our viewers. Happy Easter to all our cherished viewers.
Right, it's been a while, and it's only fitting to say, I don't know whether it is both Happy New Year and Happy Easter, as far as we are concerned. I don't know, have we spoken this year?
No, I don't think we have.
It appears we haven't, so it's only fitting. Well, grateful that you've taken the time to join us. But let's start off with our discussion this morning from the standpoint of Easter. And before the festivities kicked in, we heard from His Excellency the President talking about the fact that we all ought to adopt certain precautionary measures to ensure that there's no further spike in COVID-19 numbers during these festivities. Before that, he had given his address to the nation, the 28th one, and he had spoken about the fact that now we were free to, go to most gatherings without using masks and all of that, but that at these gatherings, vaccination cards should be checked and all of that. From my experience, places I've been to, that is not happening. So what have you seen? What have you heard? And what have you noticed as people have done Kwew? As people are still celebrating, today is Easter Monday. What is your quick reflection on the directives versus the reality on the ground?
Well, I think that as far as COVID is concerned, quite a lot of people had already given up on the safety measures. I think for a lot of people, COVID is over because we no longer hear the president giving us the usual addresses. Apart from that, you hardly even find people wearing masks in the various public gatherings and public places. And so for many people, especially market women and all of that, you hardly find anybody using the masks. And so I think it's unfortunately too early for us to assume that all is over with COVID, because it is not. We all know what is happening in China, where cities are being locked down because of cases that are coming up again. And by its nature, I believe that if we witness a spike in trend or spikes in numbers in a particular country anywhere in the world, the risk is that the potential for spread is quite high. And so, of course, we've come to a time where we needed to take measures to reduce the impact of the pandemic on our lives and on the economy. But as a country, I think that we ought to have still sustained the momentum somehow, so that we don't give the false impression that COVID is over. Already there are so many people, thousands of people, if not millions, who did not even believe that there was anything COVID. In fact, you still talk to people who say, well, it was something that was, being mentioned to scare people. It was politics. Oh, COVID didn't kill anybody. It was just people dying. And then people alleging that was COVID. How come in our community we never had anybody suffering or dying from COVID and so on? So already the misconception and wrong impressions were all over. And I think that we needed to sustain the momentum more longer than we have now. With the president's address, unfortunately, it even entrenches or enhances that misconception that people already had, that COVID was over. But I think we need to still continue with the public education so that people are aware that at any point in time we could be caught off guard.
Interesting dynamics there. Staying with the Easter celebrations. So the Christian Council's chairman has said that reducing the Easter celebration to parties and dancing is an insult to the Christian faith. It's a story on myjoyonline.com. But for as far back as I remember, and pardon my not so old age, if you like, these festivities, whether it be it Christmas, be it Easter, be it the Ramadan, have always come with some partying. Just call from the chairman of the Christian Council?
Well, I think that he is right, but the circumstances that we find ourselves in now, perhaps gives some sort of justification to why people would even want to party them more. Because for almost 2 years now, occasions that allow for people to come together and celebrate, we've had the unfortunate incident of COVID restricting the extent to which such celebrations can happen. And then we have a situation now where numbers have gone down. We hardly hear about anybody dying. Until the president's address, nobody even knew the infection rates in our country today. So it was almost like, well, for 2 years, we were held hostage by this pandemic. And for now, it appears it is over. It's time to get back to our usual lives. And in terms of getting back to that kind of situation that we've always been used to, then we do it the more. It's almost like being incarcerated and being granted freedoms. You may end up, engaging yourself in ways that you may not have ever done in terms of, exercising your freedoms and so on and so forth. Of course, I think that moments like this are moments for reflections, moments for examining one's own life in relation to what we all know about, Christ or in Islam, Muhammad and their lifestyles. Unfortunately, I think over the years, that's what we've always done in terms of celebrating, coming together, which is not bad in itself. But I think that the call is in place, in order. We need to reflect more, examine our lives more, try to see what COVID has done to us and how we recover, and share ideas and thinking around these issues more than celebrating and throwing caution to the wind.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it, that Passover, Easter, and Ramadan in 2022 seem to be coming to us at around the same time. Very interesting dynamics in there. But from what you've seen, again, right before we move away from the celebrations and COVID-19, from what you've seen so far, are you hopeful that we'll get past these festivities, Easter now and Ramadan shortly after? Still managing our COVID-19 levels, looking at what you've seen out there. I'm sure you've been out yourself.
Well, one can just be hopeful that given that the numbers are fewer, the possibility of coming into contact with an infected person is therefore automatically also low. And to that extent, we can just be hopeful. The other thing is that once the numbers are down, it would mean that capacity for case management would be higher because, as the president said, our treatment centers are empty and so on. I think the danger is where you have an overwhelming numbers that makes it difficult for our medical personnel to be able to cope and manage. Overwhelming numbers that then makes our treatment centers full to capacity, and therefore in terms of resources and equipment being difficult to find. So even if there happen to be a few cases here and there, given that the numbers are not that high, I believe that we should be able to manage them well and come out of it as soon as possible. The best is not to even have any case at all, like the Chinese are trying to do now in some of their major cities. But in the event that unfortunately we do record a case here or there, I believe that we should be able to manage them. And again, I think that people, at least those of us in the cities, have come to terms with what must we do in the event that there are increasing numbers in terms of the safety precautions. At our workplaces, what must we do, and so on and so on.
Interesting points.
And I believe that I don't expect that. Yes, I don't expect the numbers to get back to where we used to be. I just hope that we don't even record any new cases at all.
We've had reports as well, interestingly, within this period and slightly before, of some road accidents, people dying across the country, very grave incidents. We even had an incident of a boat or a shipping vessel, capsizing in the Volta region and all of that. All of these, usually within the festive season, we have the MTTD this year, they had ramped up just to save lives and all of that. Operation Spokesperson, for example, so that in each of these long buses and all of that, The people appoint one person to speak for them, and they can interact with the police and all. But it appears the death tolls are still high. Your reaction to the carnage on our roads?
Well, it remains a very unfortunate development. People have said if you look at the numbers of people who get maimed and those who get killed, and in terms of even those who die alone, it appears that we lose more people to road accidents than we have even lost to COVID over the last 2 or so years. And that's really unfortunate. I think it comes down to perhaps the biggest societal challenge we face now, which is our attitude of lawlessness, our attitude of recklessness, and our attitude of indiscipline. I think that is what it is down to. It's not about the nature of our roads. That is not to say that our roads are in perfect shape across the country. But if you go to the hinterlands where roads are not too good, potholes, and so on and so forth, those are the places that you also record fewer incidents of road accidents. And that's because, by the nature of the road, drivers have to be disciplined, drivers have to avoid overspeeding, and so on. We crave for maintenance of our roads, and rightly so. Unfortunately, it appears that it is our best roads that records the highest number of road accidents and therefore the highest numbers of fatalities. I think a lot more has to be done in terms of law enforcement and in terms of self-discipline. And by way of law enforcement, I think our police, road safety authority, they've been doing quite some good work, but more needs to be done. I believe that if the laws were to be strictly enforced, drivers would act accordingly, and that to some extent will reduce the carnage that we are seeing on our roads. Not too long ago, we used to hear that articulated trucks and heavy-duty trucks are not supposed to be moving on our highways after 6 p.m.
Right.
One wonders what happened. Of course, it put some limitations in terms of our capacity to transport goods and services. But if that has been reviewed, what were the countermeasures that were adopted to ensure that the risks posed by having these vehicles on our roads at that time is somehow mitigated? So I think law enforcement, we need to do more of it, and then instilling discipline. Again, in terms of law enforcement, who are the people driving? Do we really have qualified drivers on our roads? Or it's just, persons who feel, oh, I can move a car, and with or without a license, they move on. In terms of driver's licenses, how do people acquire them? Do they really go through the testing that needs to be undertaken before they are issued driver's licenses? I doubt, because sometimes, people who perhaps have driver's licenses, and you wonder. And those of us who drive on our roads here in Accra, sometimes, the way trot drivers, the way taxi drivers, and sometimes even people driving private vehicles, the way they conduct themselves on the road, as if they want to fly. So, as I keep repeating, it's a question of law enforcement and the discipline that we all have to ensure that our roads become more secure and safer for all of us.
Right. And we have, that Kia Rhino truck that recently led to the deaths of some 5 people. It's been a sad, Easter period. But like you're saying, there's a lot more work to be done, and hopefully we shall do it. But from the carnage on our roads, let's talk a bit of politics. You followed what has been happening in Asin North. And yes. Now we've got to, in fact, it's a discussion we're having today with Abraham Amaliba as well, of the NDC's legal team. But looking at all the developments from the High Court now to the Appellate Court, and of course the Supreme Court also playing its bit in there recently, allowing that injunction and all of that, we've heard from the likes of Professor Kwekwasari. And it's interesting what he says recently. He says the Constitution did not permit Ghanaians to hold dual citizenship. Therefore, Article 94.2 is not a dual citizenship office holding exclusionary clause. And he is basically saying that we are stuck in the 18th century if we equate citizenship to allegiance. I'm sure you're getting his point, that the mere fact of citizenship is not equivalent to allegiance. And this is, he cites Article 94.2 which provides that a person shall not be qualified to be a member of parliament if he owes allegiance to a country other than Ghana. It does not provide that a person shall not be qualified to be a member of parliament if he is a citizen of a country other than Ghana. So again, you could call it loopholes in our law, because since 1992, there are a lot of things that have come up and people have said, this is not concrete. That is why we need to look at our constitutional arrangement again. What is your take? Do you agree with him?
Well, I very much agree. I think that, well, the framers of our constitution may have had some idealistic views in terms of making those provisions that make it impossible for persons who have dual citizenship to occupy certain positions in our country. But I think that we've gotten to a point where we need to look at it again. Because for me, it's more about who are the persons with the requisite skills, patriotism, integrity to help develop this country. And to be honest with you, from my engagement and listening to some people who, are obviously persons who hold allegiances to other countries, sometimes you get the impression that certainly perhaps they even mean well, more than those of us who are just, we are Ghanaians and hold no allegiance to other countries. There are people who are doing fantastic work for this country and yet have, dual citizenship. Is it about persons who can contribute to the development of this country? Of course, they must be Ghanaian. And we do know that there are occasions where we hire expatriates to come and help us. So if expatriates can hold or help us in various endeavors, what then prevents us from having our own citizens who, for one reason or the other, decided to take up citizenship of another country from serving in a role such as being an MP or even a minister? Because look, there are countries out there, even including the US, let me say the most advanced country in the world, the most economically powerful country in the world, militarily powerful country in the world, who are still tapping into talents from other countries. And some countries would, if they know this person has a unique talent, is in another country, they sometimes would even encourage the person to take up citizenship of their countries because they have a unique talent that can contribute to the country, to their countries. So why are we as a country discriminating against our own people by the fact that, the person also holds an American passport or holds a Canadian passport and so on and so forth? I think it's important that we take a look at that particular provision and limit it to, it doesn't matter if the person, for the fact that the person comes down to want to contest to be an MP or wants to be a DCE or wants to be a minister or support our development in any way, should tell us that, well, the person sees himself or herself, first of all, as a Ghanaian. And the reasons for taking up nationality of another country sometimes is just to help people educate themselves, help people get some benefits of the country where they have decided to take up opportunities for education and so on and so forth. After that, if they want to come down to help in one way or the other,
right,
why must there be a restriction? I don't think that it's a helpful provision in our constitution.
Right. Let's take, and that story was from graphic.com. Let's just look at a few more stories from there. There's Kwewu retains spotters' ultimate Easter destination, and paragliding returns to Kwewu after 2-year hiatus. There's also Dag Heward Mills loses first son, and of course our hearts are with him in his loss. Never a pleasant affair to lose a child. I've not been there, but I know people who have, and it's shattering. So we commiserate with him, the church, and the entire family. But there's also imams told to lead crusade against drug trafficking consumption in Zango communities. That is graphic.com. What do you make of this? Imams told to lead crusade against drug trafficking consumption in Zango communities. And put that side by side. At a point in time, his soul rest in peace, Busumur Kofi Annan did talk about legalization when it comes to weed, okay? And he spoke about, let me just leave it in that context. Everyone will get it when I say weed. He spoke about the commercially viable aspect of it, and it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. Some have been pushing for that. In fact, we have our own legislations in line, with that. And some are hoping that in the years to come, it would not just be legal, for example, for medical purposes, it would also be legal for recreational purposes. What is your take on this? And then the charge for religious leaders to, aid people move away from drug trafficking and consumption in the Zango communities?
Well, first of all, let me also add on to the expression of commiserations to Bishop Dark Heward Mills. It's a very, very sad development. Of course, as you said, we have not gotten there yet. We don't ever wish to get there yet, but you can just feel the pain even if you were to imagine it. And so it's a very sad development, and our commiserations to him, the wife, and the family. And we pray that God grants our late brother a peaceful resting place. Now, on the advice to the imams to lead crusade for, Zongo communities to get rid out of the weed smoking or the phenomenon of smoking or using drugs, I think it's a welcome call, because especially those of us who are Muslims, we get worried when people see our Zongo communities as the hub for crime and the hub for criminals. Unfortunately, that is becoming a deep-seated perception. And that's also been entrenched by the fact that if you look at our political system and the whole thing about vigilantism and persons who are used sometimes to commit crime and mayhem during elections, people will tell you that a lot of these people are from our Zongo communities. I mean, we all see ourselves as Zongo people, and Zongos are very, very decent communities. Zongo people are very decent people. Unfortunately, we do have sometimes these elements that give a wrong impression about, what happens in the Zongos and so on and so forth. So yes, imams as religious leaders do have a role to play in terms of sanitizing our Zongo communities. But I think that it's important for us to also recognize that in terms of opportunities for the youth, young people or the youth in Zongo communities happen to often be the most deprived. And therefore, it wouldn't just be a call to say, advise them to desist from this. We have to look at the causes of, the reasons why young persons in Zongos may resort to drug use. And for me, it's mostly because these are persons who are, sometimes skilled, but without jobs. And so whilst we do the advice, it's important that we also create opportunities that will enable these young people to get meaningfully engaged. And I believe that, yes, we have to advise, but at the same time, let us also look at the opportunities that have to be created. And that is why some of us were happy when there was a Zongo Development Ministry, Zongo Development Plan, but unfortunately not much is being seen in terms of the contributions of these new developments for our Zongo communities.
Suleimana, before you leave us with any final thoughts you may have, I just want to take a look at some quick stories from the BBC as well, just to give us an international perspective of what has been happening out there. So, war forces Germany to burn bridges with Russia. I'm talking about the Ukraine-Russia war. There's also Mariupol doesn't exist anymore. That's according to Ukraine's foreign minister. In other stories, Nigeria's Spider-Man fights for a cleaner society. You should check out that story, a very interesting one. And Ukraine forces in Mariupol will fight to the end. It's interesting because what we're hearing from out of Ukraine is that Mariupol as a city no longer even exists, but those there are still going to maintain their ground. But Suleimana, your final thoughts as we wrap.
Well, I think that the developments in Ukraine is a cause of a source of worry, and it must be for everyone around the world. And whatever interventions that need to be put in place by global leaders need to take those actions to ensure that at least the war in Ukraine is brought to an end, because it is not just the global impact that we sometimes would tend to look at. It is also about humanity and what is going on in Ukraine. And I think that it's a very, very unfortunate development, and the world must have capacity to be able to bring that to an end. Now, if you have 1 or 2 minutes, I just want to touch on the conversation that preceded our discussions in terms of the food situation and food prices in our country. I just want to say that one of the ministries in this country that has been churning out very, very, wrong and false information has been the Ministry of Agriculture.
You mean the Ministry of Food and Agriculture has been churning a lot of false information?
Exactly. And I think that the Planting for Food and Agriculture, Planting for Food and Jobs is certainly a great initiative. Unfortunately, whatever that is good about the initiative perhaps has been taken away by the high level of propaganda and the high level of misinformation that is often churned out by that ministry in terms of our food production capacity and rates, and in terms of what is happening in our agricultural sector. I think the minister himself has consistently been putting out false information. He's always been exposed for the wrong information that is put out there, but it appears that it doesn't deter him. And that is why we are where we are. We get the false information and the false hope that we are doing well in terms of our food production capacity and how much we need in our country to feed ourselves and so on and so forth, all for the sake of political propaganda. And I think that if we don't move away from that, if we had time, I could give you figures and statements that the minister has, been putting out there, which are all false and creates a certain false hope.
Suleimana, we don't have that much time, but I would like you to touch on, if you can, briefly, because I didn't know you would go off on this tangent. I would like you to touch on one or two briefly. You can just mention which specific issues, and we can take it from there.
So, for example, if you take our soya bean production, for example, the minister on February 3rd, in a meeting with Tony Blair, put out a false information that, before 2017, when this government came to power, Ghana was producing less than 100,000 metric tons of soya bean a year, which was false. And then he went on to say that since coming into power, the soya bean production has increased to 250,000 metric tons, which again is false, because the latest information, the latest figures by his own ministry indicates that even as of 2020, where the figures were available, we were not doing up to 210,000 metric tons. And even the projection for 2021 was not even up to more than 215,000 metric tons. So you ask yourself, why would the ministers sit and say publicly that we are doing like 250,000 tons when he knows that that is not true? He talks about maize production, in another encounter. And in fact, on this occasion, he even contradicts himself in terms of what he tells Parliament and what he says during his own vettings, in terms of vetting to be a minister, in terms of the figures when it comes to our maize production. He talks about the fact that, we were doing less than 1.8 metric tons of maize production before 2017, which is false, because the World Bank figures even indicates as at 2012, we were doing as high as 1.95 metric tons. By 2010, we were doing 1.87 metric tons. And he says by 2016, we were doing less than 1.8 metric tons, which is false. Then he talks about by 2017, we had then moved to 1.8 metric tons, which was literally what the country was doing. So if a minister gives this impression that, we were doing less and now we are doing more, when in reality, what he is saying is actually what we used to do, then we create a certain false impression. All is fine. Food production is going up. Right. And then we find ourselves in the situation that we are in now, where we have had to ban maize and soya bean export also the last time I was reading. So I think it would be good if the minister and his ministry would begin to tell Ghanaians exactly what the figures are, so that Ghanaians are not deceived that, because of Planting for Food and Jobs, we are doing this, when in reality, that is not the case.
Suleimana Brahima, refreshing that you could join us, and especially with your take there at the end. A lot to digest. But thank you so much, sir, for making the time to join us.
Thank you very much for having me, and have a great day.
All right. Suleimana Brahima, of course, is with the Media Foundation for West Africa, Executive Director. I'll just wrap with this message quickly coming in just to acknowledge Kenneth Yao Amadu. You've been watching us online from New York, and you say good morning to all of us here at Joy. Well, good morning to you too. I see it's 3 past something in New York. Up next, we have sports.